You good, Irene?
Yep.
Okay.
This one's going to be more contentious.
Attacking Twitter for exercising its own free speech rights. Last week, President Trump says he'll introduce.
Are people still arriving?
We have, we just had someone arrive. Everybody who has shown up thus far is in the meeting.
Great. All right, welcome everybody. This is the June 2nd, 2020 Caroline Town Board agenda meeting. I want to start by saying I hope everyone is well. This has been a tough week in the news and nationally. I can remember when I was in high school having tumultuous time with race relations. And so I just, you know, I hope we all, you know, this makes us think about how we treat each other and value one another. So
ready to pay.
Just leave it at that. So as usual, I'm going to start the meeting with an opportunity. First, I'll say I've turned off the chat, except people can chat to the host.
Mark, can you say the date, please?
But yes, it's June 2nd, the agenda meeting. So, but otherwise, I've disabled the chat in keeping with the format of regular town board meetings. So with that, I would ask anyone who wishes to speak to the board at privilege of the floor should raise their blue Zoom hand. There should be an option to raise the hand at the bottom of your participants window.
Yep, Barbara has raised her hand, Mark. And I'm
Okay.
Gonna,
yeah, let's see. Are you on the unmute there?
Yes.
Great. Okay, Barbara.
Thank you. My name is Barbara Ruth. I live in the town of Caroline, and I have lived here for 33 years. I have in my household my husband at this point, but I also raised two daughters over their lifetime. They were born here in Caroline, and one actually happens to be named Caroline. That's how fond we are of the town. And I'd like to share that that they really enjoy, they no longer live in the area, but they really, really love coming back to this area and hope one day when they're more settled in their own family lives that they can return here actually and continue their lives here. One lives in Boston and one lives in New York City. And you can imagine now with the conditions that are going on in both those places, starting with the pandemic several months ago, and now with the race relations and peaceful protests, as well as rioting and looting, they have come to really appreciate the values of living in a community like the town of Caroline. And I think that's really important to consider in light of this proposal for the local law that would provide a 180-day moratorium on actions that are subject to a site plan or subdivision review. That allows time for our planning board and the citizens of Caroline who are active on that planning board to solicit input from across the community and have the community have an opportunity to reflect on the values that we hold dear. The community values, the social relationship values, the environmental values. The planning board has spent time and effort in coming to a revision of the comprehensive plan. And I think it's really important to give them an opportunity before we lose the opportunity to act on and live out our values for the town of Caroline, because some type of subdivision review or site plan would come into effect before that 180 days is up, if that moratorium is not approved, that it simply allows the planning board to continue with their efforts to update the comprehensive plan, get sufficient input from the community about our shared values and what we want this community and this town and this locale to be like going forward. And so I really appreciate their efforts, and I appreciate the efforts of the town board to give this serious consideration, to think about the legal aspects, and to certainly think about the value aspects of what is before you. So thank you very much for the opportunity and for all of your efforts.
Thank you, Barb. Next is Lizzie Yvette.
How's this? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Elisa Ebbett. I go by Lizzie, as Mark mentioned. I live at 298 Bald Hill Road, where I have had the extraordinary good fortune to have lived for the last 45 years. My daughter, her husband, and their 2 children live next door. And so now we have 3 generations in one family as Caroline residents. I care deeply about the future of Caroline, not just for my children and grandchildren's sake, but for all the current and future residents of this beautiful and special town. I'm in favor of the moratorium. Caroline is familiar with moratoria designed to allow us sufficient time to consider all the angles on a particular issue, or to protect our community from large outside companies that have no regard for the quality of our residents' lives, the well-being of our community, and the health of our land and environment. I remember the moratorium on fracking that allowed us to explore what we could do to protect us from what could have been the disastrous effects of fracking. That moratorium gave us the time to research all the possible repercussions of fracking, to assess the will of the people through circulating a petition, and to explore the legal implications of a ban on the practice of fracking. This ultimately led us to institute a legally sound and majority-approved ban. It took a while, though. Democracy can be a slow process, but by using all the tools of the democratic process, we were able to protect our community from the ravages of the environment, the harming of people's health, and the tearing apart of the social fabric of the community that we have seen take place in many communities in Pennsylvania for many years now. Our careful, measured process paid off. Let us use a similar device, a 6-month moratorium, to employ everything in our power to determine whether the proposal before us fits what we want for our community, because we have a right to have a say in that matter. And what we want for our community is being spelled out in our comprehensive plan, still in progress and in the hands of extremely competent, profoundly civic-minded people who have already spent years diligently compiling the feedback they received from questionnaires to create an accurate picture of what residents of Caroline want their town to be. They need a few more months to complete the plan. In the meantime, the moratorium states, quote, "It is crucial to maintain the status quo relative to land use developments and subdivisions," end quote. It strikes me that it would be irresponsible for the town board to rush into permitting this project without being guided by the comprehensive plan, especially since the kind of land use this proposed project entails would have profound and long-lasting effects on that precious area of our beautiful town. Thank you for giving me the time to make my comment.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Mm.
Pam is up next, Mark.
Okay. Pam Geldner? I have
Yes.
that right?
Yes, it's Goldner.
Goldner. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Hi. Thanks for letting me speak. My name is Pam Goldner. I would like to voice my support for the moratorium on any new commercial development in the town of Caroline for 180 days. I would like to see the completion of our comprehensive plan first, which has been delayed due to the current coronavirus spreading rapidly through our population, which has shut down schools, businesses, and most normal daily activity. This is not a good time to make a decision on approval of new projects. We do not want to jeopardize the loss of our rural character and by unplanned growth without land use regulations. I have lived here for 27 years and I plan to live here for another 27 and feel strongly about having a responsibility to careful decision-making about the place where I live. And that's what a comprehensive plan is all about. So it just makes sense that we take the time to finish the comprehensive plan before anything else happens. And we're going to face some, serious, uphill battle with any businesses that do want to come in. So we need to make a strong, united front with our comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Who's next, John?
Catherine and Gia.
Okay. Catherine and Gia Goldberg.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I just one very brief particular language piece around the new moratorium language in section 3 purpose. I'm just curious about, I'm struck by the use of the word blessed in the last line, and I'm just wondering about some conversation about that. I realize that there are other non-religious definitions of the word blessed. I have looked it up prior to making this comment, but I will share that when I was reading this, it just struck me, it really just jumped out at me, and I just found it really odd, honestly, and kind of unnecessary to make the point that the paragraph is making. So that's really my only comment. I don't certainly know what kind of conversation there was about that language, but I personally would prefer a different word usage because of the primary religious connotation in a drafting of a law. I find a little odd. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, great. Thank you, Catherine.
Can I just say thank you, because I'm probably the most secular person maybe on the board, perhaps, and that's my fault. I used it in the most secular sense. So thanks for pointing it out. We will amend.
Tony is up next.
Okay, Tony Reeves. And I think he's still unmiked. There we go.
Okay. Yeah, so as a property owner and member of the community in the town of Caroline, and as someone who is raising a family here, I urge you to vote in favor of the proposed 180-day moratorium on development. The basis of my request is straightforward. Local communities have a right to govern themselves in accordance with their own values, so long as those values treat all concerned equally and fairly. The work of the Planning Committee in recent years is a process of community self-awareness. It It is the way in which anyone can know what the community of Caroline values and what it would mean for those values to be realized in its laws, regulations, planning, and the like. Slightly differently, the comprehensive plan will render the values of this community articulate. This will enable town decision makers to carry out their official roles in a way that genuinely represents their constituents' will. This is surely a highly important value. And given that the plan will be completed in the next few months, it is quite reasonable to put in place a temporary hold on types of actions that are within the purview of the comprehensive plan so that equitable town policies may be considered. This basic thought is, I believe, recognized in the second draft of the local law. I read from section 3 of the proposed moratorium. Quote, the town desires to consider any recommended land use regulations that guide future residential and commercial land use developments in order to ensure that all projects are allowed, cited, and reviewed in congruence with town's vision of the community and to ensure that impacts are managed by appropriate land use regulations and resource protection laws and requirements, unquote. Indeed, this is a legitimate and significant public purpose, and the drafters of the proposal should be commended for their diligence and commitment to self-governance. If and when, at some future time, appropriate regulations are adopted, they can be applied impartially to all parties and would-be developers. This is fair. Thank you for your time and many efforts and for the opportunity to address you.
Thank you, Tony.
All right. Gerald is next.
Great. Okay.
Great.
Yep.
Hey, folks. Thank you for giving me a little bit of time here. My name is Gerald Giuliani. I'm not a resident of the town of Caroline, but I work for a solar company. We develop solar projects. It's called Distributed Sun, based out of Washington, D.C. You may have seen our solar arrays at Ithaca Tompkins Regional Airport, Ellis Hollows in Dryden, Daisy Hollow Road in Hartford, and one currently in construction on Quail Hill Road in Lapeer. In the current matter of your moratorium on site plan reviews and subdivision, we have no significant comments. It is the town's right to set out these moratoriums from time to time, especially in light of a comprehensive plan. However, in a broader sense, we would like to proceed to a defined state of regulation with promptness. A 180-day period for regulatory reflection and refinement is understandable. If the end state allows the town to consider new business with respect to site plan reviews and subdivision. Right now, we at Distributed Sun are dedicating time, like for this meeting, but we are also considering a significant investment for solar arrays in the town of Caroline. If the town can articulate the state of regulation following this moratorium and including the comprehensive plan, we would very much like to hear if and how commercial scale solar projects could work in the town. If, on the other hand, the town uses this moratorium to commence a sequential process of considering new law upon new law, such as zoning or solar siting laws, to be executed in 2021 or 2022, Distributed Sun will have to pursue its interests to install emission-free electricity elsewhere in the state. By the nature of working in New York State, Distributed Sun has shown it is not averse to regulation. It is, on the other hand, averse to uncertain outlooks for regulation or delays in projects. Due to broad policy considerations, projects planned, permitted, and built in 2021 will have a far greater chance to succeed than those even pushed to 2022. We urge the town to move towards a clearly defined regulation state for a variety of businesses by the end of 2020. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerald.
Mary Alice is next. Yes.
Great. Mary Alice Kobler.
Hi. It says that you have blocked my video, but I don't care if I'm seen.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We've invited you. There you go. Okay.
Okay. Hi. Hey, thank you so much. I just marvel at your hard work, all of you, and I appreciate your thoroughness and your considerate knowledgeable stance on things. And I am not as eloquent as the people who have preceded me, but I agree with what they say. And I really hope that you will vote in support of this moratorium. I think that for me, I was almost 10 minutes late getting onto Zoom because I was having technical difficulties because our broadband is so hard and sketchy. And I know there are very many people who would like to be on this call who don't have the technological support to be on this call. And I think a 6-month moratorium is very much in order to get all of our town people able to comment on this. So I feel strongly that you should support it. I also wonder at the ability that the town has with home rule to set up regulations. I know that when we were looking at wind towers, the regulatory agencies require that wind towers have upfront put in plans to demolish wind towers at the end of their expected life expectancy. And what I see all over is just poorly built, dilapidated strip malls that nobody had to pay for. Nobody's moving back in them. They're building other ones. And isn't there some way that building codes could be updated and regulations put in place that these fly-by-night, they might have a store or whatever for 5 years and then we're left with their remains, if that couldn't in some way be in the process. And thank you so much. And I will say, please vote for the moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Alice.
Rita is next.
Okay.
Great.
Rita Rosenberg.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm Rita Rosenberg, and I live with my husband, Don Barber, at 108 Landon Road. And I'm here again to share with you my thoughts on the moratorium, and thank you for your patience. At the May 13th Caroline Town Board meeting, a public hearing was held for Caroline citizens to share comments in regard to the proposed local law for a moratorium and to listen to the discussion between town board members. Just prior to the board discussion on the moratorium, Councilman Tim Murray acknowledged the strong public support for a moratorium and shared his support as well. He reminded the town board members to focus their attention on the content of the moratorium and not the business establishment. Unfortunately, his words of caution were not adhered to by the majority of the town board members. It is my hope that this evening both town board members and residents can focus their statements on the moratorium as it relates to the continued development of the town's comprehensive plan. This is not a referendum on the Dollar General. So it has been almost 3 weeks since the Caroline Town Board members deemed the existing local law for a 180-day moratorium needing refinement. The local law has now been revised with input from town board members and legal advice from our town attorney. Local laws to enact a moratorium is not new to the Caroline Town Board. All members here tonight, with exception to Councilman Murray, have been involved in the drafting of moratoriums and voting in support of its merits. 2 examples: in 2017, a 180-day moratorium was passed on all development with a hold on site plan and subdivision projects while the board updated town laws. And that worked. They stayed within that 180-day time frame. And Councilperson Mark Whitmer, John Fraser, Cal Snow, and Irene Weiser all supported that moratorium. And then, as it's been shared previously, in 2012, the 180-day moratorium on natural gas extraction was passed with support of Councilperson Irene Weiser, which led to a town-wide ban on hydrofracking, again, staying within that time frame. During that very challenging time, the town board was confronted with numerous legal threats and intimidated by large corporations. Our town board representatives then stood strong and clearly demonstrated that the citizens of the town were worth fighting for. Your constituents are once again asking to allow the 180-day pause. We expect the town board will once again demonstrate due diligence by voting for the second version of the local law to enact a moratorium. Thank you as always for your time.
Thank you, Rita.
All right, Mark. Kira is next.
Great. Kira.
Oh, hello. Thank
Hello.
you all. I don't need to start my video, but thank you for the offer. So my name is Kira. My wife Rose and I have lived in Caroline for the last 7 years, and we hope to be here for many, many more years. We wish to strongly voice our support for a moratorium. I wanted to acknowledge how hopeful I was when I saw Irene Weiser's new virtual background that made its debut on May 13th with a pastoral setting and red barn in the background. It was comforting to see that she, like so many of us, has an appreciation for natural beauty, that kind of unique character that sets Caroline apart. We ask that you bring the same passion that you had when opposing fracking to this decision now for a moratorium that will help uphold the vision of Caroline that we all hold so dear. It's that kind of vision that an overwhelming percentage of our local community wants solidified once and for all. It's what brings so many of us back to these meetings again and again, asking all of you to vote yes for a moratorium so our planning board has the time they need to complete our town's comprehensive plan. I think it's safe to say that we have all lost sleep over this matter. We're talking about building the framework for our town's future, our children's future. We're talking about what we value and what we have the courage to stand up against, and our voices matter. We all deserve to have a say in the direction our town takes from this moment on. The moratorium will allow the community to have that opportunity, to have our say, to give input, to contribute ideas and visions. I implore the town board to consider the legacy they wish to leave, to not be deterred by any intimidation from outside parties, and to base your decisions solely on the voices of those you represent. Thank you all very much for your time and attention to this matter.
Thank you, Kira.
Okay, and Alex is up next, Mark.
Okay. Alex Spencer.
All had said, but I haven't seen him unless he's hiding behind jeans. So do we know if Cal's here tonight?
Cal had eye surgery this week.
Oh, okay.
So he's recuperating. He's fine. It was successful. So we don't want him reading anything. We want him resting, and so.
Okay, so should I say what I was thinking and hope that he hears it in later, or just keep it to myself?
Well, the meeting's being recorded, so he'll have an opportunity to.
Okay, all right. Hopefully he'll get to hear this at least. So to everybody, thank you for your continued work on the issue of this moratorium. I really appreciate your diligence, and I trust that the most recent version quells any fears of litigation resulting from our community pausing to be intentional about its future. Some of the things that Cal said at the last meeting, I just wanted to get some clarification on and address. He was pretty concerned about the town taking on a confrontation about land use and property rights, and added that he was concerned that the town has the risk of losing a significantly expensive confrontation in court. And I just wanted to respond by saying that a moratorium is not the permanent removal of anyone's rights, but a pause to allow the town to get its house in order and that I don't think that there'd be any reason for confrontation or lawsuit, and maybe if he still did, he could share those with us. But given the brevity of the moratorium span and the waiver process for developers built into the second version, it seems to me that there is no loss of rights or defensible reason for a lawsuit. He agreed that the comprehensive plan had to be updated and finalized, and that he hoped it would happen expeditiously. And I've been attending the last few planning board meetings as an observer and have heard late June to July as an anticipated timeframe for the release of a draft. So I believe that that should alleviate that concern. It seems like it is moving along appropriately quickly. Similarly, there's been conversation at the planning board about being more explicit and concrete about language. Cal had shared the example of the concept of a rural character as something nebulous, and those drafting the comprehensive plan have also had that conversation. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how they address that in the plan, and note that a moratorium allows the planning board the time to be thoughtful and intentional about such considerations. Some of his other concerns were site-specific about a specific project, and I understand that temptation, but beg us all to stay focused on the greater concept of the moratorium as a tool. It's a tool that we, the people of Caroline, can use temporarily to preserve our own right to discuss and decide what we want for the future of our town. We're all in agreement that this is a wonderful place to live and a community to be proud of. And Cal said that he wanted to do the right thing by it, but was afraid that we might be picking a fight we were going to lose. And I just wanted him to clarify why he thought there'd be a fight, because the moratorium is just a pause with no rights taken and the opportunity for developers to apply for a waiver. And then he also shared that he had enjoyed, in his words, the eloquent, thoughtful, and heartfelt dialogue of the last few months. And I want him to rest assured that much more of the same will follow as we provide input and discuss the draft comprehensive plan this summer. Please support the moratorium, which would help ensure that we are the ones who get to decide how Caroline will grow and change. And thank you to everybody on the board for improving the language of the moratorium and for continuing to hear us.
Thank you, Alex.
That's everyone so far, Mark.
Okay. Great. If anybody else wants to speak, could they raise their blue Zoom hand? We just got a late arrival.
It doesn't look like there's anybody else, Mark.
Okay. Let me. Okay.
Mark, I have in the chat asked if I could have a spot to talk.
Okay. Okay.
Great.
Sorry, Jonathan, I misunderstood your comment there.
Okay.
Great.
Should I go ahead?
Sure, Jonathan Comstock, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Yes, I support the moratorium, and I think it is a very important thing at this point in time. There are so many dramatic changes to the way we are going to be living in the future, and at the same time we want to preserve values that we think are important to our communities. And you know, the changes include how we're going to use energy, social justice, economic justice, equal rights, but it's also how does the way we structure our infrastructure impact all of that? And I think that completing the plan is of essential importance, and that we need to do that, and then do thoughtful and considered legislations to manage all of these things. And I'm not really thinking of any particular single business. I just think that all of this development should be delayed so that we can make sure that it's, that the decisions we're making are consistent with our values and with the input of all the town people. So I don't think to say any more than that. People have been very eloquent about all the different reasons and language and everything else.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, if there are no more blue Zoom hands or requests for public comment, thank you everybody for your thoughts. I'll move on to the meeting agenda. Do we have any additions or deletions from the agenda?
Yes, Mark. I would like to go into executive session at the end of this meeting to discuss possible acquisition of property or an option that it would not be prudent to discuss in open forum at this point.
Okay, we'll add that on. Thank you. Anything else? Great, okay. So with that, I will formally introduce this new version of the moratorium local law, which has been posted to the website and was put out in the announcement for this meeting. So it's now introduced, and just to clarify, I think many of you already know, but with the introduction of a new draft of this law, we're taking a conservative approach to say that the changes are substantial enough that we wish to go through the formality of a new process, a new public hearing that would allow further public input, and then after that we would bring it to a vote. So so that's just we will not be voting tonight because of the structure of the process, and so with that, I would like to propose that we set the public hearing for the beginning of our business meeting next week on May 10th at 7 o'clock. So I don't know if it's recognized by New York State town law, but I did see 2 thumbs up, and there's a third one, so we have a quorum.
And it would be, just for the record, Mark, it would be June 10th, I believe.
June 10th, thank you. I'm glad you corrected the record.
No worries.
Yeah. So,
Would
so
this-
we will.
would this be the right moment to make an emendation to the revised town law, a friendly emendation.
Say that again, Tim. Sorry.
When is the right moment to make a friendly change to wording in this proposed town law?
I think we would. Yeah, I don't know if we could make those changes now, or
we haven't seconded the revised town law yet, right? So we couldn't just make a one-word change. While we present, I'm just asking when we would do that.
It's a good point.
We could do it either way.
Yeah, I think since we're introducing it tonight, we could make tweaks now.
Seems like the best time to do it.
It seems like now would be better if we have something we want to do.
So I would like to go to the third paragraph of section 3, which is purpose. The final sentence.
Are you focusing on any particular word?
Yes, so instead of is blessed, I would like to say the scenic views this rural part of New York preserves and seeks to protect.
So just so we've all got it, Tim, could you just read what the
Yeah,
final
I
thing
thought
would
the
sound like?
easiest thing would be to take out is blessed to.
Mhm.
So it would read, this rural part of New York preserves and seeks to protect. Correcting I think I actually vaguely recall that I might have been responsible for that clause. So
Yeah.
I want to correct myself.
Okay. Great. I have one editorial proposal as well. Also in the purpose, and that would be to insert, if you'll see, so the first sentence of the second paragraph says the town desires to consider any recommended land use regulations that guide future residential and commercial land use developments in order to ensure that all projects are allowed, cited, and reviewed in congruence with the town's vision of the community, and so on. So for the first sentence of the purpose, I would like to insert after approval of residential and commercial development projects subject to subdivision or site plan review, just to add some specificity there. That seem acceptable?
Seems good to me.
Yes.
Okay, great. So that's a friendly amendment. And I had one other question. So I don't know if you go to the waiver section 7, I noticed this today. So it's A, so it says substantive requirements, no waiver seeking relief or partial relief from the requirements and restrictions of this moratorium shall be granted unless the town board shall specifically find and determine and set forth in its resolution granting such waiver in whole or in part that, and it lists 7 different items. On number 5, it says the impact and harm to applicant in denying a waiver will be outweighed by the benefit to the community in preserving the status quo.
Sorry, where are you, Mark? I'm lost.
I'm on, it's number 5. It's under A, the A section of waiver, of the waiver. Section 7 waiver, then you go to A, and then number 5, it's the first sentence. And so this is one of the 7 points that are considered in granting a waiver. And it says the impact and harm to the applicant in denying a waiver will be outweighed by the benefit to the community in preserving the status quo. And my question is, should that be, will not be outweighed? The impact and harm to applicant in denying a waiver What are your thoughts?
It's a really good question. I don't know.
Stay here one more time, please.
So the impact and harm to the applicant in denying a waiver. So if you deny the waiver, what it says is, then it will be this is something that you would take into consideration, it will be outweighed by the benefit to the community in preserving the status quo.
If we read the following clause, then it says, but such rights or investments shall be only one factor in balancing tests of hardships and harms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Frankly, I would almost recommend that we begin this number 5 with the third line and begin it by saying the town board may consider the applicants or landowners vested rights and monetary investment in the ground, but such rights or investments shall be only one factor.
Mm-hmm.
Balancing tests of hardships and harms undertaken by the town board in consideration of this finding and factor. The costs and expenses of a waiver application shall not be considered as any or part of it, monetary investments, arguments, calculation, harms, or hardships. It seems to me that it's implied that the benefit to the community in preserving the status quo would be one of the considerations as well.
So you're saying the first clause is really not necessary?
As I read it. I agree with you that it may confuse the issue.
It's confusing, yeah. I think I like that change, Tim. I think that would fall under, I don't think it changes the, substance.
Or we could say the impact and harm to the applicant in denying a waiver will be considered in relation to the benefit to the community in preserving the status quo pending completion of this comprehensive plan, and then considering this factor the town board may consider. That might be clear. That might be more inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
The impact and harm to the applicant in denying a waiver will be considered in relation to the benefit to the community.
I like that.
Because the waiver is asking us to overlook the benefit to the community in preserving the status quo.
I like that.
That's clear, I think.
The impact and harm to the applicant in denying a waiver will be considered in relation to the benefit to the community, and so on. And just continue as it is from there. Right. Yeah, I like that.
Because we're not talking about weighing or outweighing one or the other.
Right, right.
Which is why we have a waiver process.
Yeah. Do other board members, are you in favor of that? Are you conflicted? Are you worried? Do you like it?
I am not sure that it's correct because, I'm processing it and rereading, but I think the intent is to sort of lay out clear parameters for waivers. And so what I think the intent of it, and maybe I'm wrong, I didn't write it, is to say that there would have to be a very compelling outweighing of one interest over another to get to the level of waiver. And so my interpretation is that the language we're looking at here might actually water that down a little bit. and make it less clear what the criteria for a waiver would be. I'm not sure outweigh is super clear either because it doesn't put a metric to it, but at least it specifies that there has to be a fairly significant loss to the landowner for it to be considered. So just something to think about.
Yeah, I don't, it's not quantitative either way. I mean, the thing that confuses me about it, this is about denying a waiver, not granting a waiver. So if we denied a waiver, if we denied the waiver, what the original language is saying, that would be outweighed by the benefit to the community. I think that's nonsensical. Because if we deny the waiver, we're maintaining the moratorium. I don't know, maybe I'm not thinking of it right. But that's why I like Tim's language. It sort of frees us up to say,
I mean, I do now see so if you read the Section A substantive requirements, it says no waiver seeking relief or partial relief from the requirements and restrictions of this moratorium shall be granted unless the town board shall specifically find and determine and set forth in its resolution granting such waiver in whole or in part that.
Yeah, it's talking about the granting of waivers.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That the impact and harm to applicant in denying a waiver will be outweighed by the benefit to the community.
So my interpretation of this is that in the process that it's basically telling us that if we were to deny a waiver, the harm created by denying such a waiver would be so egregious and outbalanced by the benefit of the town. That's what I'm reading in this.
Or relative to the benefit.
Or relative to the benefit to the town, right?
Yeah.
Right, and I think doesn't Tim's language capture that as well, or no?
I think it weakens it.
But either way, I mean, how would you judge outweighed?
That's a different thing. That's right.
Outweighed versus relative to, I don't really see a difference there.
Well, and it might be that this is laying out a process in terms of like conditions that would perhaps rise to a level, but it may be actually up to the board to come up with the concrete mechanism. I don't know if the law is to be so specific as to say what the metric shall be.
Yeah, Mark, I have a suggestion that if we can call Guy and get clarification from him on this language rather than us trying to figure out what we think it ought to be, if he's available and can consult.
I did, I did run this question by Guy by email earlier today, and I asked him if I'm confused about this or if there should be a not in there. And he said, I think you're right. I think there should be a not in there, but I've still been scratching my head about it. I mean, I'm wondering if, I think we know the intent of what this number 5 is saying. We could just leave it alone and
well, can I make a recommendation? I mean, we can always amend a clause in the law.
Right.
Next week.
That's what I was going to say.
No, if we're making a substantive change, then it has to be subject to another formal hearing.
I wouldn't say this is a substantive change.
Right. I agree with that.
at all. I mean, it's just
Right.
it's a semantic change, but it's not substantive.
Editorial, yeah.
Well, if we already have Guy's input that it should say not, that the impact and harm to the applicant in denying a waiver will not be outweighed. Right? That's what you're suggesting, is that Guy has already said that that's how it.
That's what I asked him today.
And he
That's-
said, yes, it should read not.
He said, I
instead of
think you're right about that. Yes,
will not be outweighed.
correct.
I think that we should make the change now. And that speaks more to John's interpretation, which is that we're saying, you know, that there needs to be some balancing. You can't cause so much harm to the applicant that it's not outweighed by that the benefit to the community has to be significantly more than the harm to the applicant.
Right.
So I think that it makes sense to add will not be outweighed. I would support making that change before we officially introduce this law and vote on it.
Okay.
It does seem that not is missing there. I agree with that.
It also makes much more sense in relationship to the final clause.
Yeah.
Asset rights or investments shall be only one factor.
Right.
Yep, I agree.
I'm in favor.
So everybody's in agreement that we add not there?
Yeah.
You okay with that, Tim?
Yep. And I
Okay.
would just recommend that we just refloat it by Guy one last time.
Sure. Yep.
Well, and so when we vote that this is being introduced, we're voting it in with that amendment, and we'll need to publish the revision so that
Yep.
the law that people are reviewing
Right.
and that we would be voting on next week will be with that change
Correct.
incorporated.
Right.
But the public needs to be reviewing the properly revised language. But, you know, both the taking out the word blessed as Tim has discussed, and thank you, Catherine, for that. And then also adding the word not, so that we'll have to quickly publish the revised version
Yep.
and circulate that as the version that will be forwarded for the public hearing.
Okay, so with those were 3 amendments. So the change to the blessed part, and then
I give my blessing to that change.
The addition of residential and commercial development to the first sentence of the purpose, and then the addition of the word not to number 5A of the waiver section. So with that, I guess make a motion to introduce this second version as revised tonight.
Second.
Seconded by Tim. Any further discussion?
Nope.
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. It's introduced, and and I guess I don't know if we had a formal resolution for setting the public hearing, but I guess I'll make a motion that the public hearing be held on June 10th at 7 p.m. at the beginning of our business meeting this month.
I'll second that.
Seconded by John. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So, great. Okay. With that, I'll move on. If there's no further comment, I'll move on to committee reports by board members.
Okay. I'm ready to go.
Okay. Go ahead, John.
All right. So I'd like to actually start with, before I get into my committees, with just a statement of support for people of color and also for the LGBTQ community. I'd just like to read a little something. On Sunday, May 31st, 2020, I participated in a peaceful demonstration at Caroline Town Hall in support, defense, and celebration of people of color. People socially distanced from community members who were not in their family, and most wore masks. Approximately 35 community members attended with signs and received many honks and hand signals of support from passing motorists. There were a small number of hand signals of non-support, and one resident who lives in the vicinity expressed his disagreement with the demonstration. I want to share this because at this moment in time, it is particularly important, in my opinion, for public officials to speak out loudly about equity and to do so on the record. Further, as a public official who recognizes that because of his race, gender identity, and sexual orientation, he implicitly enjoys privileges that others do not. And I want to say this clearly. No one is equal until everyone is equal. And I want all people to hear this message particularly clearly. Black Lives Matter. I would also be remiss if I did not send a message of greeting, support, and solidarity to people of Caroline and everywhere who identify as part of the LGBTQ community. As requested by my wife, Nancy Kane, the Pride flag will be flown outside of Town Hall for all of June in honor of Pride Month. And that's just something I wanted to share with our community. And I will get into the more tactical parts of my committee report. One thing that I'm super excited to share is that the Highway Department Building Task Force has made some real progress on our project. We are aware of a property, and I said something somewhat cryptically at the beginning of the message that we may want to look at as a possible site. And of course, that wouldn't be smart to just say right out there before we've had a chance to discover it, or discuss it rather, because there could be negotiations involved if we liked it. But we've also met with representatives from the LaBerge Group about conducting a feasibility study of 3 potential sites. They've provided us with a proposal, which again, we can discuss in executive session because it does disclose the property I mentioned. Although ultimately that would be something we could make more public. So that I will distribute that to board members. But there's a lot of progress and there's a lot of reason to think that we have some potentially really good options ahead of us to move this project forward. Also, just so you know, the Joint Youth Commission is working hard on trying to sort of navigate the next round of funding. COVID-19 impacted a lot of organizations that JYC funded. I attended the May 12th meeting along with our representatives, Nancy Kane and Karen Scott. And the board did a really good job talking through different funding models and what they might look like. Camps in particular are particularly impacted this summer, although an announcement did come out tonight that June 29th might be an open date for camps. So that's good news, potentially. But a lot of it's going to be about what operations might look like and what steps would need to be taken to operate safely. As I mentioned in the last meeting, JYC decided to issue a request for proposals for funding to give other organizations a chance to be considered. And that application is available now with a return date of June 30th, 2020. Although if there are organizations that have extenuating circumstances due to COVID-19, they will entertain extensions to that. And so that's what's going on with JYC.
Great. Thank you, John.
Welcome.
Any questions for John? Did John, did the Youth Commission, did they talk about adjustments for, municipal contributions? How are they handling that? And
That was a beginning of a discussion with them. Yeah, they are aware that there's at least the possibility that there might need to be some adjustments to that.
okay.
Of course, we hope, never to try and impact services like youth programming, but, when we get into this budget season, I also understand that everything will rightly be looked at.
Great. Okay. Thank you, John. Irene or Tim?
I can just say that the planning board is meeting tomorrow night, which would be June 3rd at 6 p.m. By Zoom. And I'm assuming that the meeting Zoom URL will be posted on the town homepage, if it isn't already.
Yep. Will do. Great. Okay. Thanks, Tim. Irene, do you have anything to report? You're muted.
I do not have anything to report, no.
Oh, okay.
Thank
you.
Well, I don't, should I report from TCOG, the presentation I gave there? Just briefly to say that in TCOG, I have been working on the energy committee there and gave a presentation on community choice aggregation, which some of you may recall I looked into a few years ago with the TCOG committee at that point that I chaired. In any case, back then we weren't sure that it was going to be, for a variety of reasons, that it made a lot of sense it didn't seem to make a lot of sense at the time to jump on board with CCA, but I think there's some circumstances that have changed and some new models that are being proposed. And so in any case, TCOG and, with my participation on the Energy Committee, we will be looking at community choice aggregation again. For those that are unfamiliar with the term and are listening in, CCA is a really wonky, terrible name for a very cool idea, which is that a municipality can pass a local law to procure energy on behalf of its residents and potentially procure at a cost competitive price green energy. And so that would be a very great thing if we're able to do that at a price that's competitive to the price that we get right now from NYSEG and to other solar farms and such. So anyhow, something we'll be looking into.
Great, thank you. Okay, thanks everybody. I'll move on to the review of the minutes of our last meeting on May 13th. And ask if anybody has any comments to offer. Great. Hearing none, I'll say just the minutes are thereby approved for the May 13th. And thank you, Jesse. And then agenda items for next week. We're down there. We'll start the meeting with the public hearing. And I will follow that with a vote on the moratorium law. No unforeseen circumstances. materialize. And I don't have, Chris West did reach out to me, and I haven't gotten back to her. If she does want to present to us about the Thomas Road Wetland project about before, then I'll put that on the agenda. I don't know.
I'd like to.
Other agenda items for next week that people
Yes.
have? Okay.
I think likely the task force will have a motion to potentially approve moving forward with consulting for the highway department building.
Okay. Got it. Anything else?
Mark, do we have any updates on what's now happening, what the progress is for the retention pond and the land in front of the town hall?
Yeah, I can give you that, a brief. So I spoke with Dondi today, the engineer, and he's, as you know, we put that, so we have that, we have a site plan for the parking, paving, the bioretention, and sidewalk, all integrated into a single plan. We put that out for bid a while back, a year and a half or so ago. And so after speaking to him, he convinced me that we should, he recommended we put it out again as a single bid. He thought we'd get the best value by doing that, and then the contractor that we selected could coordinate and integrate all the work. So so I would propose that we revive that plan and put it out for bid, and get the process in motion so that we can select a contractor. So and it's, again, it's something it's something we put out a couple years ago. It didn't work out with the one firm that we chose then, but I think we should put it out again.
Is that something you'd be ready to put on the agenda for next week?
Yeah, it'll be fine. Yeah, I agree. Good.
We have another agenda item, Mark. Will messaged me and it has an update for us on age-friendly communities.
Oh, yes. And yes, I'm remiss in not, yes, that's right. Thank you, Will. Great. Any other thoughts? Those are good thoughts. Thank you. Okay, great. So with that, I will make a motion to move into executive session to discuss something that may involve property acquisition. So,
second.
Yeah.
Second.
As John described earlier. So.
Second.
Seconded by Irene. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So 8:18. Move into executive session.
Okay.
And that, just so people understand, means that the guests have to leave the meeting.
Right. And I will stop recording now as well.